Everybody. Apologies and reasons for absence.
Councillor Venning is on annual leave. That's okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Borough Councillor has a JTB meeting. Community Warden has been in Maidstone all day, so she's already done a full day. And our PCSO, it's his day off, but he has sent a report which I'll bring up under items for information. And Chanel, his other half, is on leave.
Right. And we'll hope that Alan is just on his way nipping in.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything else to say otherwise.
Okay. Does anyone have any interest pecuniary or other than pecuniary to declare? I didn't spot anything particularly.
No, nothing.
It's one of those things we do have to be very careful about, and it's easy to forget, like the woman who's just had to resign from the Bank of England, the Deputy Governor today, for having forgotten that her brother worked for a bank. Oops. Okay, so we don't have any applications. A reminder for everybody that the meeting is being recorded, as always. I'll now adjourn the meeting for the public session. We are facing quite a busy agenda tonight. We do have one particular, we've got 2 or 3 planning things, but one particular one that I think will need a bit of time spent on it is Tilehouse Farm, what we call the orchard. So, shall we start with the public session? Is anyone here to talk in favour of the planning application at the orchard? Here he comes. Almost the nick of time, Alan. We've just done the apologies, and we didn't apologise for you. But we did do the declarations of interest, and I need to know, of course, if you have any there. No.
Not that I can think of.
Good. Good. Okay, we're just about starting the public session. Is anyone here to speak on behalf of the application at the orchard? No. Okay, does anybody want to speak against that one? Miriam?
Well, I've sent round to councillors my views on the previous application for 3. I felt that was important because I was a bit surprised to learn that the Parish Council thought that my husband and I had supported the previous application, when indeed we objected to it in its terms. We don't actually see any fundamental difference between the application for 3 and the application for 2. Councillors will be aware that the application for 3 is gone to appeal, though not yet validated. I'm not sure yet what the process for that will be, whether it be on written representation or very much doubt it would be an inquiry. I think the officers' reasons for refusal were pretty clear in terms of the impact on the conservation area and the impact on the Highfield AOMB. We know from our community-led plan that the preservation of the conservation area was high priority for a high percentage of people in the village, and it's flagged up in that document as such. And I think the actual statistics in that case back it up. So I think then obviously the Parish Council went from objecting to the 3, unanimous objection, to unanimous support.
Yeah.
So I think perhaps it's difficult to know where the Parish Council stand, and obviously you've got a new application to consider, but I would hope that you would take into account the impact on the conservation area and the very special circumstances we have there, whereby the historic core of the village is intact at the point where it meets the countryside, which, if any of the councillors had been at the appeal on the Stocks Road, the planning officer from the Highfield unit didn't say an awful lot, but one thing that she did say was that was something that was indeed very special and ought to be preserved, where you've got the historic buildings still intact and not being encircled by modern development, which is what would happen in this case. You would lose that connectivity between the historic buildings and the agricultural hinterland, which is a really important feature of this village, and obviously the A&B unit recognise it as really important to the A&B as well. So I leave those points with the council for their consideration. I have not yet been able to put in my additional comments. There are just a few things that I have picked up on this new application. The applicant is persisting with the idea that this is previously developed land, even though the officer has said clearly in the assessment of the previous application that it is absolutely not, because there has never been any permanent structure on the site. So that is an important point, and something that really needs to be addressed. The other thing that I picked up upon was in the last application, that ecological survey hadn't actually been published when I put in my comments, and now I've had the opportunity to read it. I mean, some of the things in there are absolutely ludicrous. I mean, the idea that badgers do not live or forage on or near the site is absolutely ridiculous. Anybody who knows this has seen badgers dead on the side of the road there frequently. There are badgers foraging in that area the whole time. And the footnote in that report, you know, when it says what evidence there is to back that up, it's this personal observations of the ecologists who've done this survey, which I think, you know, for any of us who live around there, and I was speaking to the new people who've moved into Tyson, that, you know, they've seen loads of badgers around there. So, I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous to suggest there's no badgers foraging in the area. There might not be a badger set on the land, but to suggest that they're not is... So I would say that some of the things in the new application really don't quite stand up.
Fine. Somebody else want to speak on the same subject? No? Mary, please.
I might just add that this point about the intact transition between the historic settlement and the rural agricultural hinterland. I did ring the planning officer at the AONB unit last week just to confirm this, and she said yes, this is absolutely so. It is very rare and really something worth concerning.
Okay. On that side of the road, of course.
On that side of the road.
Yep,
It's a pity it's gone on the other side. It makes that particular side of the road all the more important.
Right, okay. Does anyone else want to speak from the public on that application?
The only thing I'd like to say is, I presume I did look at it briefly, the two proposed dwellings would be within the garden of Farmhouse, is that right?
The so-called orchard on the side.
Yeah.
Not the actual garden of Tile House,
Oh,
but the extra piece of land that was tagged on the side, which is traditionally the orchard of the farmhouse, I think is what's suggested.
Right.
It's the extra sort of L piece that
Then
stretches up the road.
On the website, I just wondered if quite so many trees had to be taken down and what
I saw that,
plans there were for conservation of the trees. You know,
Sure,
trees
understand.
are. That's the only comment I had.
Okay.
I have no objection to dwellings.
Okay.
That's all.
One clarification from my point of view to what Miriam said earlier, the anxiety on her part that, and it was a meeting I had with her some time ago, that I'd said that I didn't understand you to be opposed to the earlier application for 3, and I've read your note that you put in now, and I have come to understand why that is. There were 2 different applications for 3. The first one that you put in your opposition to, which you've now passed to us again, but it went in the portal, the parish council, as you just said a moment ago, unanimously opposed it. We then got a revision. It wasn't a new application, but it was a revision to that application. They shuffled things around on the site. That's the one that we then unanimously supported. You didn't actually put any comments in on that, nor when you sat here, and that's why I thought that you were not opposed to it. I knew you were opposed to the earlier one, but I had no reason to believe you were still opposed to the new one. That's where that's all possible. That's all possible. Yeah, that's all possible. But because you hadn't said anything and there wasn't a new thing on there, that's why, and that's what we changed our views on. Anyway, that was just a clarification. Okay, so that was the Tile House Farm, the two houses, which we'll come to in the council meeting. The other planning application we've got is the Kingsgate House. I'm taking them out of order. Kingsgate House, Kingsgate Lane, conversion of existing garage to gym treatment room, replacement swimming pool and erection of ancillary outbuilding, change of external materials to existing outbuilding. And councillors may have noticed, and members of the public perhaps, that has also changed since we had it come round. They've shuffled the application a bit. It is all really a bit frustrating when things keep changing, and then in this case often being withdrawn and redone and that. But anyway, we make of it what we can. Does anyone want to speak to that application?
I just want to ask a question. Is that because they're going to actually run a business there too? Was it just for their own personal use? Well,
I think the simple answer is don't know.
Oh right, okay.
I did notice that the outbuilding, which has which is being altered, conversion of existing garage to gym treatment room, is kind of a decent sized bungalow, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I do have possibly some information on that.
Please do.
And that it's, I think they're a wealthy family and it's for recreational personal use.
Okay, fair enough.
But I don't think
I just wondered if anyone was to say
for pool parties.
Particular facilities.
For pool parties.
Exactly, and so the parish council will be invited.
Oh well, we don't want to have an interest.
But it's conversion of existing building anyway, so it's not really interesting.
I think they're changing the pool a bit, extending it a bit, changing the shape, and that sort of thing. Okay, so no one else has anything to say on that. Are there other subjects to raise from the public? Please, Mary.
Can I just say one more thing about Tile House?
Oh yeah, if you want.
Last time the parish council switched from objection to support.
Yes, indeed.
This time, when we're considering it, can we focus on the site, which hasn't changed? Okay? It doesn't matter if the design's changed. The site is the same.
So you're going for best of three?
Sorry?
So you're going for best of three?
No, I'm just encouraging our councillors to focus on what the problem is here. It isn't a problem of design, it's a problem of location.
All right, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think you put that in a note earlier.
Right, sorry, I'm repeating.
Yeah, that's all right. No, it's all right. I think it's a perfect. I mean, we've got quite an interesting discussion to have when we get to it, I think, for a variety of reasons, and we'll have that when we get to it. But I think that the point you make is a perfectly fair one. It is a site which is not run of the mill, let's say, but then very little is in this place. No, I take your point. I do accept that it is next to the conservation area. Sorry, it is in the conservation area because it goes around the boundary of the garden. It's in the conservation area. It is on this boundary that Miriam quite interestingly pointed out, and the AONB unit and that. But there are other things also coming in, and it is actually a tricky balance. Are there other points to make from anybody? Yes, please, Miriam.
I just wanted to raise the issue of the cemetery.
Yes.
I've followed this for quite a few months.
Yep.
And I'm a bit concerned that all discussion now is the exclusion of the public. I just wondered if the parish council should explain to us why the public are being excluded. You seem to be spending quite a lot of public money too in this matter. Should we not be party to the discussion? Can
Okay.
you explain why we're not?
I can give you some explanation now in the public session. You're right that we have had a number of closed sessions. Most of those closed sessions have been what I might call relatively limited updates to the important work that went on in the first closed session of that series. You will find that there is some open stuff today on the cemetery, such as money, for instance, which of course that's the way it should be done. We will have a resolution again this time to carry on a little bit in a closed session, which of course is up to the council whether they resolve that or not. And if we do, it will be because there is yet another update for the bit that's been in closed session all the way through. Once that comes to fruition, then obviously it needs to be moved into the public session and minuted. But at this moment, that would be premature.
Yeah, but can we have an explanation of what it is that's
No.
sensitive? I understood it before.
No,
I got that grasp of
okay,
that.
no, that's good. But
got the grasp of
if
what
I
it
was
was
telling you what it
before,
was, then I wouldn't be having it in a public
Okay.
session, in a closed
No,
session.
I mean, I don't think that's entirely true. I mean, the presumption is that the parish council's business will be done in public, and it's pretty rare
Yeah,
that stuff
indeed.
actually, that
Indeed.
every month
Yeah.
it's been
On the same aspect.
But before, it was obvious what it was, and I accepted that because if you remember, I did challenge another item being in private, and the parish councils actually voted for the public to remain. Because it was, when it was explained, nobody could come up with a good reason why actually we were chucking the public out. I mean, you can't just chuck the public out because you don't want them to hear what you're going to say. It makes you feel uncomfortable. That's the nature
Okay.
of
Well,
the
I've
parish
given you the
council
best
business.
explanation I can.
So what I'm saying is it can't be the previous reason because that's gone, that's done and dusted. So it must be something else. And having been party to all those discussions, I haven't actually twigged what it is.
Well, I'm very glad. I'm very glad. The
No.
last time when you challenged it about 3 years ago, probably, we had been, and I wasn't chairman then, but I was supporting this position, and you corrected us on it. It was concerning the affairs of a particular family in the village, and it did seem that for reasons of privacy, that it shouldn't be done in public. And of course, councils do take that attitude at higher levels than ours. The particular issue now is not that issue, it is a different issue, and it is one that I have taken the view and councillors have agreed with ought to be done in closed session. And as soon as it is dragging on, I would much rather that it had been resolved much quicker months ago, but it hasn't been. Once it is in a position to bring to the public and we know what we're doing, it will come to the public. But at this stage, it would be premature. And if the council resolves this time, and it's up to them, I'm only one vote, but if it resolves to take it into closed session again, that's what we'll do, I'm afraid.
I mean, you of course, you're quite right that you can make that decision, but I think
Indeed.
that
Yeah, that's exactly what we'll do. I mean, there's no point just going back and forth, Miriam.
Explanation.
Okay.
I mean,
That's all I can
would
say.
That if the public had been perhaps party to it for all these months, perhaps we could have raised issues, because the thing that is in my mind, and I don't know whether it's ever been in the parish council's mind, is that have you actually approached Ashford Borough Council for pre-application advice on whether you would ever get planning consent for an extension of the cemetery in that position? And do you understand all the onerous tests that you'll have to undertake? I mean, has that been looked at? I mean, surely why would that be in private? I mean, surely that should be in public, but I've never heard it mentioned.
I didn't say that we'd done that in private.
Yeah, but that's what the point. My point I'm trying to make is before you're going ahead and spending all this money on fees to various people, wouldn't a more sensible approach be to go to Ashford Borough Council with pre-app advice to say, actually, we're going to be losing orchard, so that's going to be a consideration.
No, we're not losing any orchard.
Well, the land is not designated as orchard land. I thought it was.
I think orchard is defined as having apple trees on it, and it hasn't.
And it's a private
But the
piece
thing,
of
it doesn't
land.
matter whether anything's private. It has a planning use. Every piece of
Any,
land.
anyway,
has a
my
planning
understanding is that there has been some discussion with Ashford, which may put you in
use.
at
So
that
you
time.
have had.
I haven't, no. It wouldn't be me who would do it. But there have been discussions with Ashford.
Who would have the...
I have. I'm Clark. I have.
Okay, so
When we first started, I
Right.
spoke to Ashford, and they advised me on that
okay,
before
so-
we went. As you are saying,
Yeah,
no point in going ahead with something that
Yeah.
can't happen.
so we've had the planning...
Yes.
Okay.
We've had
So let's
advice, but that's never minuted anywhere, that we've had advice that they would be,
Yeah.
in principle, happy with an extension to the cemetery in that location. So you've
I
got
don't
that
think it
right.
probably has been minuted. No, it's something
But we
it
weren't
was
resolving it, were we?
it was something that before we could even talk about it, it seemed to make sense to find out. So I did before
You
we.
didn't share that with the councillors then?
She did.
Well,
Probably
then why would you share
did.
it with the public?
Well, it
I can't imagine that it wasn't, to be
No.
honest, but I don't think it really adds up to
But I
anything.
might not have minuted. I don't minute every single thing.
Yeah, but
It's a
it's
minute. Our minutes are a list of decisions made. That wasn't a decision.
Ages ago that you have spoken to Edinburgh Council and they're content.
Well, that's why we're carrying on, because
Well, I
it
was
hasn't
aware
been
of
an
it.
issue.
Some of the councillors weren't on the council then.
I propose that we curtail this.
I think that it's fair enough. I think we're just knocking it out.
Can I just say one thing as a parish
If you wish.
councillor? So I think there are times when we will need to go into private session, and that's for us to decide if it's the right thing to do. And I just want members of the public to be confident and reassured that we only do that when we find it's really necessary. But we have agreed there are times, and this is one of those topics where we have had to. So I just want to reassure you, for me, it's been the right thing for us to do at the right time. But
It's gone on for a long time, so obviously that's what my only...
We're sorry that it's gone
But
on as
they're an
long as it has.
exception, Miriam. They're not
Down to us. Thank you, David. Okay, I shall close the public session then, if everyone is happy. Good. Public session's adjourned, or closed rather. So back to the council meeting, and we can confirm the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any comments on the first page?
No.
I'm sorry to say, George, your name was spelt wrongly in 3510.
Oh, sorry.
We wanted you to have a yellow hat.
Yeah, never happened before.
I did see the minutes. I did see the minutes. Well, it does say amenities, parking. I did see the minutes before they were settled, and I'm sorry I didn't spot that one, and nor did my worthy clerk.
Do apologise.
Anything on the next page, or the one after that? I've
nothing.
printed mine line and a half. So, are we happy that the minutes are all? Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Right.
Ready for me to?
Initial the top. Initial the. Thank you. Right, initial down the bottom, please.
And then
Sign. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, that's supposed to be signed.
And date 14/3/17. Okay, minutes are signed. Good. So where am I going to put this? Matters arising. The clerk's
All right,
report.
I haven't got a report as such. I've just got a couple of things I'll mention.
Okay.
I think it was about 9:30 last night. I got an email from Ashford at last to say that it was okay for the signage that Mrs. Lewis has asked for on the Register Village Green to go ahead. So I sent an email at the time. So Mrs. Lewis knew as soon as I did, virtually.
So that's actually got a tick for all the things we needed
Yes.
to do. That means that we now need to get down to cases with Mrs. Lewis on behalf of Mrs. King as to exactly what might be done for what.
I think it's in Mrs. Lewis's hands now.
Right, okay, good.
I was asked to find out whether it was possible.
Yeah, indeed,
which
you've
I've
done that. Okay, so
and we know the sort of thing she's talking about, and we've agreed on where it will go.
So now, then, if Mrs. Lewis comes up with a proposal for something which can fit in there, can be done, which will be presumably sort of robust, and that is within the kind of budget that Mrs. King is thinking of, then it all fits together.
Yes.
So we'll leave that with you. Thank you.
And just an update on the local needs housing. I thought they'd actually started work, but no. Testing and trial pit digging is what they're doing at the moment. There's been some discussions about the soil structure and the impact on foundation design. So
an impact, you said?
Impact on foundation design.
So in other words, they found that the soil is worse than they thought, or some such.
And they've been told who the site manager is, but they've also been told that a proper start on the site may not happen until the end of April, beginning of May. But the contact details will be sent to me, and also they're getting a programme sent to me as well, so that could be helpful.
Okay. Kind of matters arising, just to spend a couple of moments on. This goes back 2 months, so if I just give them out, this ties in, and I'll explain what's there. This ties in with something we just got today from NALC through CALC. You remember from previous discussions that the government are always threatening to cap parish councils, and then they never quite do. And they didn't this year either, but they also each time threaten us with capping and saying they're only deferring the decision and all the rest of it. And this particular one, this is when the minister met the chairman of NALC, said, and parish councils have got to be really, really, very circumspect and not put their council tax up and all the rest of it. Now, when we set the precept the other month in January, the point that I made at the time was that although we were going for a quite big percentage, it was a very small amount of money, and this lays it out. The first thing, by the way, I got my council tax bill today, and maybe some of you did as well. The 8% that we set actually comes out at 7.2 because they've obviously got an extra house or two in there, or some less discounts for single occupation or whatever it happens to be. This is based on my council tax, which is band F, and so I've then reduced it to D. I obviously don't have a bill for D, but it's 9/13 of an F, so same difference. So the first column is F, KCC, and then they've put in this time for the first time an extra line for their social care extra that you may have seen, giving a total KCC. ABC, Wittersham, Fire, Police, and a total. And I've reduced it to band D, and then the next year, this current year that's just coming up, the same again. And then the band D increase, you can see in the last column. And KCC appears to have gone up 81p before they add on their extra £44.46 for social. So total KCC £45.21. And that was put down as 2%. Ashford £3.99. They were a bit under 2, I think. We went up 7.2%, but it's only £3.03 a year. Fire £1.35, police £5. So out of £58.65, we're the bad boys at 7.2%, but we're actually £3.03 out of £58. In other words, it hardly comes out in the roundings. Now, you've got those figures in case, because the last thing that we were being told that the minister wanted was the maximum engagement with the public. So if anyone talks to you, I don't think they will. They haven't done in the last several years. We did put it in Outlook when we agreed that we were putting it up because of the future cemetery budget, which we have a wet finger at the moment for 30,000, which is a bit more than a year's precept. It's a lot of money. And we do obviously need to get it from somewhere. So that's just background really for everybody arising from the decision we took two months ago.
Just one more thing, litter pick, could I just have an update? I know you let us all know, but just so that
so we had 21 volunteers arrive to help out.
How many stayed the course?
Everybody.
Good.
Everybody. In total, we filled to the brim 23 black sacks of rubbish, including half a hoover, off a children's bicycle, a number of pots, hubs, wheel hubs, things like that. It was all collected yesterday by ABC. I've got an everyone that came to help registered, and I've got an insurance certificate to return to them, and they're coming to me on Friday to collect all the equipment.
Good.
Lovely.
Well, it was an excellent initiative, David. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was entirely your sort of thought from beginning to end, so well done. And it's something that we obviously need to do occasionally. The place does look cleaner now, except I did notice that some obliging someone had tipped an empty Kit Kat wrapper just along Poplar Road today.
Yeah, the rubbish now stands out even more.
Yeah.
Well, the bin men have contributed to the rubbish down the road with broken glass and things like that.
Oh, have they? Right.
Anyways,
well done.
I wasn't there, I'm afraid we broke away.
But we've left Moon's Green to you, or
all of it.
Potman's Heath, as you say.
We do regularly do our own little bit out that way, but it's not nothing like what you've achieved.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any other matters arising? No. So we now come on to Kingsgate House then, the conversion to the gym treatment room, etc., which is of course what was put forward before, then withdrawn, then put in again, and then revised slightly. And the point that Alan made earlier. Does anyone want to start us off with that? One point, I should have added, we have had, if you noticed it, something come in from one of the neighbours, maybe the closest neighbour.
Yeah, the only one. There was only one that was consulted.
Is it someone, Boris?
Yes.
I know him by sight. He came in and said fully supported it. And we are talking about a house that's pretty remote. Who wants to start us off? Anybody?
I'm happy to say that I support it as I did before.
Okay.
I could find no objections when I've read all the documentation.
Okay. I think my only anxiety, and I don't think it applies in this case, but my only anxiety would be that it stays ancillary to the main house, because it is actually pretty bungalow sized.
I did talk to the previous occupant, and he's rather upset that his designer swimming pool is being taken out and he won't put it in.
Yes. Right.
Just one thing, Sue, on the original, you did say you had some questions.
Did I?
They obviously got answered.
They'd obviously been answered.
Right.
The one thing that did occur to me is they're not raising the roof height, are they, of the development? Because remember there was another planning application we had for something very similar, and what we were concerned with there was the ratio of their outbuilding to the ratio of the size of the house. But I couldn't find anything in here to suggest they were raising the roof height.
No, I don't think there was the
Just conversion.
The surprising thing is that the house actually isn't listed, is it? It's not a grade 2 listed building or anything.
It's being changed around a bit because, for instance, there's an oil store that's being kind of joined into it. I don't think there very often isn't on these planning applications anything to do with heights. It's one of the areas that they're not very good at.
But I don't think it demonstrated that it was going to be.
No, indeed, either way.
Detail.
So are we happy to support that?
Yeah.
Fully? Yeah, everybody. You might just make the comment about that it should stay ancillary, although of course they can always apply to break it later, as we know. Okay. So the next one then is Tile House Farm. A few points just to start us off from me before we have a general discussion.
I do have a couple of.
Please.
I've, as you know, Mrs. Lewis is Mrs. Walton's, and the Parkers I have forwarded to everybody, so you've seen those.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of others, just to let you know, but just short ones. Mr. and Mrs. Tyrrell, who live the other side of the field, Mount Pleasant. However, as to the planning application at Tile House, we have no objection to 2 new houses, as these will have little impact on the amount of traffic on Stocks Road. Now, the next one just shows you how differently people see things. This is from Jenny Elliott, who's number 5, Ewan Lamb Mews, just tucked round in. What really concerns me, and all of us here, is more traffic on this already very busy road. So if I had to vote, my answer would be no.
Right.
So.
Okay. And we've also had a letter come in from the applicant today.
Yes, which I forwarded.
Okay. What I was just going to start off with in terms of a little background for the two new councillors and a bit of a reminder for the others who go back through that period, partly what's come out in the public discussion. This is the third application for the same site within less than a year. There was an application for 3 houses there, and the council unanimously rejected it. And indeed, Mrs. Lewis, as she was saying, put in a very strong, and it was very strong and very detailed point of view. It then got revised, although it was still 3 houses, they changed around what I think garages disappeared, carports got moved further from the road and what have you. And I think that's when Highways actually withdrew their objection, if I remember rightly. Anyway, the parish council considered it a second time. I mean, it was a revised application, and at that point unanimously approved it. Part of, possibly, I can't be sure why people take the decisions they do, I certainly approved it, but part of the reasoning there, I think, was that our thinking moved on in the context because Piper's was still a live application and it had gone to appeal. Members of the public and councillors the first time joined in with the idea that it was premature to consider what should happen to Tile House Orchard when we didn't know whether we were getting 27 houses on Piper's. I suggested the second application, a way of thinking of that was to look at the possibility first that Piper's was approved and then that Piper's wasn't approved and look at them separately. And I suggested that, and we had also in that same period of time considered the draft local plan, which said that Wittersham should grow organically, if you like, I don't know if that was their word, by infill. And we knew that there wasn't very much available infill. In fact, that's one of the issues about this one, that it's infill or not infill, because it's either in an existing curtilage or it's on the edge of the built-up area. You can look at it both ways. But the logic appeared to be that if the Piper's was approved and we got 27 houses there, then Tile House Orchard was a small green gap, which would very logically become infill and represented less of a issue with the countryside that we've heard from the public this evening. If Piper's was approved. If Piper's wasn't approved, then the land, as it were, became what has just been put by Mrs. Walton tonight. You know, it stands out as, you know, the break between the built up and the not built up. But the fact is that we would be looking for getting some houses somewhere, and you have to go for where a possibility is. Now, whether that was actually the issue for councillors, I can't tell, but that was kind of the context at the time, and we did, and Miriam was expressing some surprise, I think, we did switch from opposed to support. We're having disassociated the two versions of what could happen. Of course, we now know more. We know Piper's has not been approved, at least for now. I suppose it'll come back one day, but maybe not in my lifetime. And Tile House stands on its own. We either get some houses there or we don't, and that's what we're going to decide. That's Ashford's decision, but we're going to decide whether we support it or not. The other thing I just wanted to add was, as a response before we have a general discussion, to what was said by Miriam and Mary earlier about the field and the conservation area and the AONB's point, which I take as said. I don't know, I wasn't there. I'm sure it was right. The orchard as part of Tile House curtilage was included in the conservation area because they included Tile House, so they go around Tile House. It comes in for that reason. The legislative background of conservation areas is that they get put in for architectural or heritage reasons. They don't get put in for countryside. In other words, this is conservation of a street scene, in effect, not conservation of nature. And the last thing is that, irrespective of the AONB's comments, the inspector, when considering Pipers, the whole 27 houses, said that he did not regard the conservation area as one of the reasons against it, because it's, like all conservation areas, it is effectively a built-up conservation area, and therefore being in a built-up area is not really the point. I mean, if you go down the street, you come to the end of the conservation area, wherever they decide that's the end of it, it's not the last house. If you go down Swan Street and the rest of it, or along Poplar Road, of course, you come to, I don't know the address, but you come to Pauline's house, it's in the conservation area. The next one in Forge Meads isn't. You know, they have urban joins. So that is something for everyone to consider. That said, it is a perfectly nice green piece of land, and we've got to make that judgment. So apart from that background from previous deliberations, because all that's been said in previous meetings, where do people want to start? Do you want to start, George?
Yeah, I mean, I think the previous discussion, I think, and I'm not sure why I voted for that, for approval the last time round. It may be due to an ignorance generally on what was involved, and I think the whole issue around Pipers has made me more enlightened about the issues involved in countryside with AONB and other issues around that same area. So that might be you suggesting you weren't sure how other people had voted or why. In terms of the reasons why I don't think I wouldn't approve it, I wouldn't approve it, is that I think it's been well rehearsed, and a lot of those discussions we have had in relation to Pipers, and we did have, I guess, in relation to Tile House itself. And I think for me, part of the issue still is to do with the conservation area, the AONB, and as Mrs. Walton just said as well, this whole thing with the connection between the historic buildings and the arable area. So I think they're all part of that same picture for me. And also the fact that the very fact of, although you can't, if you have the houses you have to have it, that extending the footpath along again would also changes the nature of what you're looking at. You're not looking at countryside scene, you're looking at more urban scene.
Sure.
So they would be the issues for me in terms of why I'm not in favour. Alongside that as well, I think when we looked at a previous, I'm not sure whether it was the first one or the second one, I can remember being told that Tile House itself was uninhabitable. It was on the verge of falling down, and that it would have to be demolished. And yet it hasn't fallen down and not been demolished, and there are people living in it.
I don't think anyone said it was going to fall down. What they said was it had to have some work done on the trees because it was cracking badly.
But I think the impression was given that it wasn't going to be, and I think that was part of the argument about if that had to go, then you'd have other houses there. But obviously it's not gone, so that would be again another reason why I would be against it.
Right, Alan.
Yeah, just for clarification, presumably the family who lived there, who I remember well, they sold the block.
The Lions sold everything. The developer bought it all. This is my understanding.
Okay.
He then sold the Tile House to the family from Catford who moved in a few months ago, just before Christmas. But they retained the orchard. They have fenced it off. And they either still retain the orchard or it's gone to somebody else because it's got a different name on the gate. But that may just be their builder.
Same planning application.
Same
the
planning
name
application,
is in the same.
Yeah. So it may just be that that's the builder. That may just be that it's the builder that they will have when they get permission.
It is the builder.
Yeah.
That's up on the building.
So it still belongs to the people who live in there.
No. The developer who bought it all and then sold the house on to somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's the potential builder for the person.
I think George's point about whether the house was falling down, I assume that the developer wondered about whether to knock Tile House down and put some houses there as well, and then concluded that that was a bridge that they too far, one that they wouldn't get, and have concentrated just on the other piece. But that's speculative.
To me, that was one of the major points that was stressed over and over again about the dilapidation of the building. So.
I'm led to believe it is highly dilapidated, but the people who've moved in are getting a grip or have to get a grip.
And I mean, it is a dilemma, and I mean, I don't actually think the two houses are going to make a significant difference to the traffic on Stock Street. I mean, that's just
Two cars.
It is. I'm sufficiently inexperienced in this role at the moment that I'm going to listen to what everybody else says.
Sure.
And
very wise. That's why I come last. Sue.
I've heard the arguments about the ANOV. I personally don't think these two houses are going to impact on that. The fact that they are close to the house. It's a piece of land. I think it will take the two. We know we're looking for pieces of land to build houses on. I don't think that's going to impact at all, so I'm prepared to support it.
Thank you.
I spent some time looking at the property last week on the land in general terms, not having the sight of one or two applications. I considered that the conservation area is important. I also had concerns about the road structure, and I felt that the way the plans are designed at the moment, the way the access would be, could potentially be a dangerous one where it is on the road. So on the basis of my initial views, that I would probably oppose it.
the highways have supported it now, haven't they?
Pardon?
Highways, I understand.
I got
Have said they would provide.
Well, they are saying, but in my position,
the second.
yeah.
Yes, but I got here somewhere. Highways. Thank you for your consultation in relation to the above planning application. I wish to place a holding objection until the following can be satisfied with respect to highway matters. A footway must be provided along the frontage of proposed development at a width of 1.5 metres and tie into the existing footway network. This will secure a safe route for pedestrians walking into the village. I believe that there is adequate highway land and land which is within the applicant's control to provide this. If the highway boundary information is required, then please contact, etc. The proposed carports are of inadequate size. The required size is 5.5 metres in length and 2.9 metres wide. I look forward to receiving the additional information in due course. So they haven't come out with what they think is
So in other words, I think what that leads to is that the applicant obviously sees that, and then they have to change their plans and confirm that they'll build the footpath and change the things in order that Ashford could consent it.
Yes.
If Ashford wanted to consent it, which is of course a different matter.
But in their consideration of the recent letter that we had the last few days, it's not included in at all.
Sorry, I
The
didn't
letter
understand.
that we received from the.
Oh, I see, from the woman
Yes.
yesterday or
Yes.
today. Yes, I take your point, Tracy.
So my position would remain the same at this stage.
Okay, understand. I mean, yes. I don't fully understand how the powers work between Ashford and Kent, but I doubt Ashford can consent it or would consent it unless that, not a condition, a requirement got turned into a condition. Yeah, but I take your point, Colin. So on highways grounds, you're uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, as well as the conservation.
Yeah.
But being new to the village and spending some time walking around and observing it,
Yeah, sure.
and the traffic that went past, and I was also looking at the sites and what needed to be taken down.
Yeah.
I had reservations at this point in time. Bearing in mind, I understand what Sue's saying is that at some stage we've got to find some land in the village to build in the future.
Indeed, which is of course coming along later in the agenda as well. David.
So I think, as before, I still sit on the fence a little bit with this one. One of the things that I couldn't tell from the plans was, I seem to remember we had a conversation last time where we said we would want them to protect the hedgerow and then set the development back off the road. And I couldn't see anything in the plans to suggest that these new plans would accommodate that. So for me that's important. I don't think I agree with Alan. I don't think traffic, two houses is not going to increase significantly the traffic noise. I don't see that as an argument. I'm a bit concerned that they've put another application in at the time when there's already one going to appeal. I don't quite understand why they would do that.
They all do that. I mean, well, I say they all do that. That's an exaggeration. It's the gaming that they do.
I've not seen this before, so no.
So they're currently appealing the previous one.
They're appealing the 3, but put in one for 2. In the most egregious cases, what some applicants do, unless it's been ruled out since I used to be more involved in it at the PLA, they put in 2 identical applications, and then as soon as it gets to 8 weeks, appeal one for out of time and leave the other one to run with the council, having of course put pressure on them that they're wanting to agree one rather than have the appeal put against them. They do have fun and games, the developers.
And then my final point is, back to Sue's point, I do think we have got to find some space somewhere in the village. And that concerns me. It's, the outlooks, it's opposite the garage, so whilst it's an area that might seem to be ANOB, it's not the most attractive part of the village.
AOMB, our area of outstanding motor beauty. Indeed. Okay, so, and I don't claim to be hugely ready to jump one way or the other. I do think it's a difficult one. You haven't quite said where you are yet, Alan, either.
It's been most helpful listening to everybody, and I know which way I'm going to go at this point.
Oh, good. This is like rock, paper, scissors.
You're allowed to say.
Well, I think you're going to have a vote, aren't you?
We are going to have a vote. We have to have a vote.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome. Okay, my view is rather torn, as I said. I think that the concern about finding places for the houses is quite important. On the other hand, rather, as I used to say about pipers, I thought that I had an each way bet because 27 houses would be very good, but if we didn't get 27 houses, we kept the field. It's a bit like that. I really want my cake and eat it, as Boris would say. I think that for, especially since I'm chairman, I think for the consistency of the council position, I will vote in favour, notwithstanding the points that were made in the public session, because having supported 3, it would be slightly bizarre in my reading of it to not support 2. So if we can go around the table and see exactly where we are, George.
I was going to say, just to add to what you said, surely that would be dependent on us not knowing any more now than we knew before. You could change your mind just based on the fact that you probably know more about it, or
you're entitled to
understanding.
I think you're entitled to change your mind. It's a new application.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In terms of the consistency for the council, it doesn't really matter.
No, I'm merely thinking of the consistency from my point of view of the council. I wasn't chairman at that time, but I think that whilst we do now know that Pipers is not going ahead at this point, the previous decision was taken on the basis what it might not. Okay, we'll look at them separately, as I tried to explain. So, George, you're opposed?
I'm in favour.
Support?
If we're allowed to put in qualifications about...
Oh, indeed. Well, we've got to put that together for Yvonne to put on his response. Yeah, indeed.
As much preservation.
So we'll discuss that in a moment. So we've got opposed, support, oppose.
Support with the
conditions, and I'm support. So we are actually supporting 4 to 2, and the conditions that we want to make in our response to Ashford are concern about the hedge, concern about the points that Highways made. One of the things that struck me incidentally about the path was when it said that there's enough land between Highways and applicant. I assumed, because it's only 1.5 metres, I assumed what they meant was the hedge would have to be trimmed back, not removed, because the hedge is quite thick there. They've got a bit of Highways land and they may be taking a foot off it or something.
Because what we don't want is for the hedge to be grown out completely.
No, absolutely. But I think that's what we've got to say as well. We want the hedge safeguarded. I think it would be fair to say, by the way, and I'm being practical here, that remember we're only issuing our support for this If I was to be a betting man, and I'm never a betting man, I'd say the chances of getting through are not very high, but you never know. You never know.
Well, presumably they'll going to be looking at the same figures that we're concerned about 75 houses in 25 years.
All of that, but then again they turned down the 3, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why they didn't go for the 27 when it was right in their, in their grasp. But there you are. I mean, planning is a mystery to ordinary people. It is really. Because I was talking about consistency. It is very hard for them to demonstrate consistency sometimes. Okay. Right. Is anything else though that we ought to be putting in on the response?
So that's the 3. So hedge, highways, but a main point about the hedge.
Yeah.
Keep it.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because but I mean, Yvonne will be making the point about the fact that the hedge has got to be.
Well, you could adjourn the session if you wanted to hear the members' public.
All right, I shall adjourn the session just very briefly for you to tell us what you want to.
Well, could you just clarify what you're actually saying about the hedge, because it wasn't clear what your comment's going to be.
What we want Yvonne to find the words for is that we do want the hedge. I mean, obviously there's going to be a gap in the hedge where people drive through it into the site, if indeed this goes ahead, but we don't want the hedge, as Alan put it very indelicately, to be grubbed out.
Yeah, but in residential properties, the only control you've got over hedgerows is when you're adjoining agricultural land, so that's when the Act comes in. They could take that hedge out tomorrow. There's absolutely nothing to stop them
Indeed,
taking that
they
hedge
could.
out tomorrow. Bear in mind the hideous fence that they put up across the land, instead of respecting what the planning application would be asking for, is the green boundaries. What they put up is a hideous fence, which has already destroyed the relationship between the house and the orchard. So you really think that they're going to make any difference?
I don't.
The hedge?
I don't know, because it won't be my development, but I mean, what we're doing is we will be saying that I mean, no doubt that Ashford are able to put certain conditions in. Once the houses, if they are ever built, are sold, is another matter. But that's where we are, really. We would like that hedge to be preserved as far as it can be.
From my memory, when we talked about it before, we said that we would only want one access road into the 3 properties.
And I think it still is.
Yeah.
Still the same.
Yeah.
Shared drive.
Yeah.
That was,
So there wasn't. You weren't having 3.
No, you had 1.
Yeah.
Yes, Sue? No. Okay, I'll close the public session again then. Thank you very much for those comments.
It won't be paved, will it? Will it be paved?
Sorry, what?
Will it be paved?
What do you mean, will it be?
Bath, yes.
Oh,
Will it be paved, or will it be kept the same as?
no, the footpath's got to be there. The highways have already said that they expect a footpath out
Yeah,
there.
but when they're saying the applicant's control, that was on the previous application. There is now a new owner of that verge. It's not in their control. So they need the permission for the new owners of Town House to cross their land. To get a footpath in.
Chairman, can we
All right.
close the session again?
Okay.
Good point.
I take the point. That's a highways letter that has just been read out, though, on the latest one. Okay, so we are now on to the forward task list. Can you take that outside, please? We've done that. We've done that. We've done that. We've done that. Okay. Forward task list then. I sent out an updated version of that yesterday, which I hope you've all got. Just spinning through it very quickly for the key points. You'll have noticed that I got an appointment with Simon Cole, who is writing the local plan. We've got that next 22nd, next Wednesday, which we will. The idea then, if you remember, is to understand what we're going to do together, this parish council and Ashford, to try and put flesh on the bones of the small policy in the draft, which says Wittersham and many other villages can build by infill. And I said we can't because there isn't enough. and he said, well, in that case, we've got to work together to find an answer. So that's stage one. The land holdings is nothing really to say at the moment, same as before. Branding the PC assets, I've sent round a list of those assets that I came up with, plus one that Yvonne put forward as well, which was the half mugger. Sorry, I didn't have half mugger on it, what I sent to you, but add that on alongside the adult fitness equipment.
Multi-use games area. Upon Coronation Fair. It's a
place for doing basketball and kickerball and and scragging each other and putting their face in the mud and
breaking bottles.
All that. So, I mean, come back with any other thoughts. In any event, we'll have to think about what we can reasonably do, because if we put nice metal signs in, they're nickable or graffitiable. If we put in notice boards in some of them, they won't be smashable because we get polycarbonate covers now, but there are issues. On the other hand, the idea, if we do decide to go for it, is to be saying to the village, these things are actually you may think that you have nothing to do with the parish council, but you do. We do things.
I think we just may have to think about which ones we put them on and which ones we don't.
Exactly.
If they're safe to put them, we'll put them.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's sort of.
Unless we have on the notice boards a list of what's.
Yeah. And on the website.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about the notice board is if you say Coronation Field, to say which one's that.
Have a little map.
Wow. Right.
I used to produce little maps when we
Churchyard
tended.
wall is sort of going along in its way. Surface water drainage, we have developments.
No.
We do. Because Yvonne and I saw them 4 weeks ago come this Thursday, that's 26 days ago. They were due to do all sorts of stuff, which naturally enough they didn't. I sent them a snotogram yesterday.
And I'd already sent before.
Yes, indeed. I sent a snotogram yesterday and I got a reply today. Quite interesting.
Is that in the minutes?
Snotogram. Double T. I went with dear Kevin Jody when we met on 16th February. You agreed to 3 early actions. You were to check the paperwork from. I'm reading this so you know what they were. Check the paperwork from your contractor to see what work they reported as having carried out in their cleanse of the street a few days before we met. Since we reported to you that about half the gratings had not been lifted and or the pots were still visibly full of detritus. You were to follow up with your contractor who had failed to jet out the lines beneath the gateways when digging out sections of ditch in the lower part of the street, although you had included that work on the order. You were to arrange for your roving drainage engineer Richard Highgate to visit us as a matter of urgency to review the situation in the street once he returned from leave on 21st of February. But we've heard nothing since and still await his visit. I have to report on this to my parish council meeting tomorrow evening and hope to have something more positive by then. And they came back this morning.
Oh no, she.
She, yeah.
Not they. No. Nothing from Kevin.
Jody, the more junior one. Quite senior, but not as senior as the other one. Dear Jeremy, thank you for your email and apologies for the delay in responding following our meeting, which I hope to get away with, obviously. I checked against the cleansing paperwork. This has Yvonne appalled. She doesn't know really, does she? I checked against the cleansing paperwork following our visit on 10th February. That's the drainage people's visit. And it was reported that 14 drains were cleansed and no jammed lids were reported. Whereas your numbers were?
8 were okay, 7 weren't.
Yeah.
However, in light of the report that you provided to us, I challenged this and it appears that the crew reattended yesterday.
I did see.
And down
You
by
did
the
see them?
church.
I saw the vehicle going along.
Yeah, down by the church. The
I'll
church
ask-
is clear, I noticed today.
I'll ask that Richard inspects to check the work done. With regard to the cleansing following the ditch works, I've discussed with Kevin and he said that this will be carried out within the next 28 days. So we're just a month behind, further back. I've copied Richard Highgate into this email so he may make contact with you to discuss the street and meet with your caretaker to view the various sites. Going forward, I'll collate the other information discussed, such as drainage plans, they were supposed to do this a month ago, and previous scheduled cleanse dates, and get this information over to you in due course. And I have since that gone back to Richard Highgate and said it was all agreed that you were coming to see us once you got back from holiday a month ago, and we expect to see you soon. Which of course probably won't happen. But that's where we are on that one. So that has kind of, in a not hugely helpful way, at least taken a step forward. I suppose at the least we can say that they're getting to know that we're a nuisance. SIDS we've got on the agenda. The information files are off a while yet. Voices proposals. I said that I would bring you all an updated list. Now it's updated in the sense that I've put names on the top. Do you want to have one for you and one for Paul? Now the significance of these names, if you take communications as the easy example, David is the council member taking the lead on it on our side. Jennifer Maynard is the steering committee person who attended the group, and Tim Heath was the leader of the group. Okay. Then there's Sue, Kathy on neighbourhood care, and then Judy Darkins, Kathy Head. I haven't got to the bottom of how they apparently were a bit of a double header. I don't know which one that'll be, Sue, but you can work that out with them, no doubt. Transport is Paul and Mary, because Mary, it is thought, did both really. She led the group, it was only a tiny one as well. Local amenities, George has the enviable position of having led the group and being the councillor. It was Roger King as the steering group, but Mary has said she'll stand in for that.
I've contacted Mary and suggested we have a preliminary meeting before I decide who else from that little group joins us.
Okay.
So I don't have to have two hats with
No, indeed, absolutely. Housing, Colin, is with Angela. Angela was the lady who was here earlier, sitting on the end. Yeah, okay. And Sean Sargent. Sean Sargent works at HP. That's about all I know. He's still employed in employment.
Live next door to the school.
Oh, does he? Right.
They live next door to the school. Yeah.
And then Alan, you've got Roger Parker. He's stepping in because this was all one group originally, and Sean Sargent again was the team leader of it. And I think he has agreed with Roger he's going to stand in and do both of them. Now, what happens next is really up to each of you. As to whether you're chasing the steering group person or the steering group person's chasing you. I would suggest that probably nothing will happen till you do it.
Yeah.
And the aim, of course, is to get as many ticks in the box and as thoroughgoing ticks as we can, bearing in mind that some of them may be slow, difficult, impossible, convoluted or whatever.
Would it be possible to get the email addresses of the relevant parties?
Oh, I sent it to you.
Yeah, I've got that already.
I sent you an email with all the email addresses on it. There was one. I didn't have Kathy Head's, but I think all the others are there. So you should have got that yesterday in the afternoon.
I think I did. You're right.
Kathy Heads was on the.
Okay.
Kathy Heads on the contact list, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Good point. So moving on. Standing orders is on the agenda. The village signpost painting by the caretaker, we're awaiting him to get on and do it really. It's just that I put it on this list so we didn't forget it. The Dark Sky Community, ABC, seem to be wondering whether they're doing it or not at the moment. I think it was the latest. David.
Well, I was going to contact Michelle again.
Right.
However, I'm meeting Michelle end of the month. She's coming here. I think you suggested here would be a good place to have is it Parish Forum meeting or one of the meetings you suggested here?
So she comes to have a
So
look.
she's coming to have a look. So I thought it'd be easier to talk to her about it than email. So I haven't
Whether we
followed
can
that.
do the parish forum is another matter. This came out of me pointing out to her that the last parish forum was done in a very nice hall with a screen this big, and 50 or 75 people there, and I sat at the front so I could see it. And I said, we've got a very good screen here and projector, but whether we can put the lunch on and all the rest of it, that's something you may be interested in, being our new village hall Oberleutnant, because there's an opportunity to make money, you see. Because Ashford will pay for it, but they do have to have a lunch put on. So that's a question. We did have a village hall committee at the time that this all came up first.
It's 5 years now.
The last thing then is FAQs and useful contacts. I await responses. We are where we were last month. So can I have anything on that, please? So that's the task list. So now we get to the standing orders. Yvonne put out a note to everybody with what we suggested after she and I went through it. Very limited changes, basically corrections. And it's amazing, this must have gone through an awful lot of people in the original NALC draft, that they got, they put original when they meant amended in 1F, which doesn't make sense. I mean, if you don't change it, it doesn't make any sense at all. It becomes Groundhog Day. Every time you amend it, you then go back to the original one again. The second one is where they had understanding instead of understanding. And the third one was where there were two possibilities in 3C and they were both left in. And I think we go for the first one. And that was it. So if everybody is happy with that, there's nothing significant there. Can I ask someone to propose?
Yes.
Colin?
Yeah.
And Sue to second it? Is everybody in favour of that?
Yeah.
So that's the first 3 sections, or the first third. We'll do the next bit for April and the last bit for May. But at least that's a pain. The others may not be as easy, I don't know, but that was pretty painless.
Tidying up.
Yeah. Okay. The next one then, I'll put these underneath the rest of it. Let me see. Okay. The next thing is SIDS, and this is where we've got Councillor Benning with 3 L's.
Yes, sorry, that's a
Never mind.
second mistake.
Has everybody seen what Paul sent through to us?
Did I couldn't remember.
No. Okay.
See, can I just ask, if I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it, can you let me know? Because normally, did I go through the agenda and I say, I'll email this, I've attached that. If I don't email it, can somebody say, I didn't get that?
That's only if we remember that you didn't remember.
Okay.
Because it was only as I'm going through today, and I see it on my screen without the tick going the wrong way, thinking, I didn't send that. So I'll quickly read out what it says, what I should have sent to you. Can
I just, before you read that, I will remind you of what happened last time, which he then responds to. What happened last time was I came with a proposal that we would have SIDS, and that Yvonne had found where to put them with the PCSO, subject to Kent agreeing and all the rest of it. There were then suggestions that it could be revised, such as that we should have the bigger signs rather than the smaller, lighter ones, even though the battery doesn't last as long because it could either be solar powered or we could change the batteries. There was an issue about not wanting to have blank poles where the sign has been moved. Paul was particularly anxious about that, feeling that some people wouldn't like to see a pole, although there are plenty in the village, but they've usually got lamps and things on the top of them, I know. And that's about where we got to. So Paul was given the job of looking into it. He came back to me and asked me what he was supposed to do. So I sent him a long email, which you won't bother to read out. And now you can read out the one that he replied with.
This was written, must have been last Wednesday. I spoke to Yvonne and Alf this morning, Tuesday, which was very helpful. You were deep in conversation. That was Jeremy. Didn't feel it proper. Yeah, anyway, forget that bit. Regarding SIDS, given that it would appear that we are in a time of funding opportunity right now, then I think we should press on and try and secure the relevant funds. The suggestion was made by Alf that a sleeve could be installed at each identified SID post location, which would allow for the installation of the pole as needed, thereby avoiding a series of unsightly poles with nothing on the top when not in use, which was my primary concern. In terms of location, KCC Highways operate the tell us where you want them and we will tell you if that is okay approach, as advised by Yvonne, which is what I was told. So we thought one each at the three main village entrance roads. Before the 30-mile-per-hour signs would be good, definitely not at the sign, too congested, as drivers would first be notified of their speed and then would see that they were entering a restricted zone and could slow down accordingly. We might also install sleeves in the centre of the village, which would give us choice and allow us to evaluate location effectiveness. Given this suggestion, at this stage I propose we go with the smaller speed only unit, less battery change frequency. We can review and adjust our approach accordingly once we have tried these out. Kind regards.
Can I just add something to that then? Paul got this idea from Alf about having a sleeve and hoiking the poles out, which would stop having to have a pole with nothing on it. Firstly, the Kent, I wasn't involved in that conversation with Alf, the Kent words that we got originally make it plain that they will sort out and plant those posts properly, not have them all on transferable sleeves. And secondly, I suspect, I don't know this, but I suspect that Alf is rather underestimating the weight of one of those steel poles if he was humping it in and out of the holes all the time, even if that was acceptable to Kent. And the last thing is, if they were all dropped into sleeves, what would stop people having them out and putting them in the van?
Except if you drop them in, you lock them in place, of course.
Well, but you're getting into more and more engineering, and they're probably not made that way. It's not only whether they're made that way, Kent know what they buy, and if they don't come with all that palaver and dig up the pavement and put a thing in to put your padlock in and all the rest of it, which some silly bugger will then fall over. I think the fact is that the idea of having it movable is for the birds. Incidentally, as an employer, we shouldn't really do things that require them to lift things heavier than about 20 kilos or 25 kilos. And I think these poles, they're going to be this sort of size. They're going to be pretty, and they're going to be 8 foot high. They're going to be pretty heavy. Reasonable wall thickness. So, where we come to, having got Paul's advice, is do we feel in a position to, and Paul also says, putting them outside the 30 limit. We're not sure if KCC at all will accept that, because obviously all you're doing is telling people how fast they're going, but the fact is that in principle they ought to be in the 30 limit and told whether they're doing it, not coming along in the 60 limit and told that they're doing 40.
Certainly all the ones I've seen have been within
Indeed.
The limit, so to remind you, you've gone past the limit.
Indeed, and you're still over. And that's what you agreed with the PCSO, the ones you got. So the question is now whether we want to try and make some progress. We're a bit late now for this funding round anyway, but who knows whether they've got anything to hang on to. Or whether we want to wait, or whether we don't want to do them, or whatever.
Jeremy, the PCSO, I'm forgetting his name now.
Dan
Smith
was going to be doing some speed checks in the village, wasn't he?
Yes, that comes. Yes, I can read his report now, but that.
I'm just wondering. It's quite good to understand from his perspective what if there's a significant problem with speeding through the village, or if it's.
I did mention that before after the first one. Can't remember what it was now, but he did say that there is. But they're not doing anything drastic, but they are people within the...
speeding up before they get to the end of the...
Yes.
As they go out, I think was the issue.
If you went, say, to the bit of Poplar Road near me, you would find that once they've come round by the pub, they put their foot down when they can see the de-restricted, and when they come in, they reckon to get down to cornering speed by the time they get to Lloyd's Green, but they've got 200 yards of 30 mile an hour to do that in.
But so my point is then that wherever I've seen SIDS operating, it's generally to tell people the speed they're doing when they're entering a built-up area, not the speed they're doing when they're approaching the. Because if that's the problem we've got, then I just think we need to really.
Oh, it's generally coming in. I agree with you. Not going out, if that's what you mean.
Well, no. What we're saying is people are speeding up when they're entering the final stages of the village and beginning to exit.
That's right.
Sid isn't going to actually resolve that as far as, because I see them as coming in and they tend to be on the left-hand side, whereas if we want to stop people, so can we swing them round?
We can have, PCSO was suggesting on the other side of the road, because if you think about it, we come in from that side on the left-hand side of the road, the sign there is on the right. Yeah. It's only on the left as you come in on the left from Tenterden. Yeah. So it was obviously thought, because what I wanted was to get the highways chap here and said, this is where we thought, well, what do you think? And for him to say, good idea, no, not a good idea. That's what I want. So when I said, when can I meet? He said, he came back and said, tell me exactly where you want them. I'll tell you whether you can have them there.
But that's what David's point is, if Dan's done some testing and he can advise us on where the best place to situate them.
We've gone through this.
Well, he's given Yvonne the benefit of his advice on where to put them. And it was one down the street and one at each end of Poplar Road, Stocks Road, wasn't it?
Yes, it was down, it'd be on the right-hand side, sort of, this side of the meadows sort of thing would have been, because it's too congested to have it on the other side is where the other one is, so it would have to be on this side. The other, yes, so that's exactly what he said.
Okay.
So I can go with that.
I suppose as to whether you look on the right to see it.
So it'll be big enough it's flashing at you.
Yeah, flashing, you would look at it.
You would see it.
Logically, you should do.
So are we happy to go on with that? Okay. It's likely to cost us some money. We don't know how much because it depends how much we can get. But of course, it's a project that's got some stages. We're not actually agreeing at the moment to pay an uncertain amount. We're saying, yes, we want to get on with it. We were given to understand by Mike Hill back at the Tenterden Forum when I started with this, which was before Christmas, that he had money available or could find it in Kent. But everything's gone, to rats now because he's coming up to the election in May and they're coming up to the end of the financial year.
I think we need to progress, because even if it just stops one resident of the village from being knocked down, I think it's money well spent.
Well, not only that, but we'd be looking a bit delinquent to having not tried to do something.
Yeah, if we've discussed it and then not.
Yeah, indeed.
We could possibly ask Mike if he's got any money left over.
Well, I've got the contact, because when I first went to them, they said, come back when you know what you're doing. Yeah. So now that we know what you're doing, I can go back and see what response I get.
I should have just clarified as well, are we comfortable then with the view, Paul didn't come back on anything on solar power or changing batteries, and he did say go for the smaller one as Yvonne read out, because then we know the battery is supposed to last a month, which means that if Alf is moving them once a month and charging them up, it all ties together rather than having to do it every week.
I think so.
I agree.
Okay, good, thank you. That's a step forward. Now, to further consider and agree future use of social media, and this was one down to David. David explained to me on Saturday he wouldn't probably be able to do anything. No. Can I just add to what we discussed last time? The proposal I had last time was for a closed Facebook page for, in effect, the council megaphone, where Yvonne, who would be the only person who could post to it, would be able to tell people what they needed to know, what was going on, what the council was doing or whatever, in a way that we try to do now in Outlook, where I put the notes in, but of course it's not as immediate, it only happens once a month. That seemed to me, at least, as long as it's a closed page, to be relatively uncontroversial. A lot of you will be using Facebook, which I don't at the minute. The other one was Nextdoor, which got a lot of looking under the bonnet and kicking the tyres at the meeting. Strangely enough, Paul, who was most anxious, was, apart from you and me, he was first on it with Julia. Everyone is a member now of the council on it. I can't pretend that it's been doing a great deal yet, but it's been doing a bit, and it will, I think, potentially grow. You used it, of course, to thank people for the litter pick and so on. And that's not actually a decision for the council. The reason I discussed it and maybe caused confusion last month was I was saying that if we have a closed Facebook page, we need to have something that is two-way. Yeah. Next door can be two-way, but I'd already suggested I didn't think it wanted to be a council initiative. It should be more a resident initiative, which is the way it's grown. We've got 49 members now in 33 houses as of this evening.
50.
Oh, 50 because you weren't listed, yes. You definitely have to go and find what you haven't ticked. Yes, 50, quite right. 50 and 33. And that's come very low key. I think it's doing what it set out to do. So, in a way, answering the question that was put to David last time when it all fell in a heap, all we really need to consider if we want to tonight is whether we actually want to get started on Facebook. One reason why it would be handy to do that if we're not already too late is that John Rivers, who knows about these things, has already said he will help.
He will help me, whatever.
Yvonne set it up. And he knows how to do it, and he's the one who gave the advice at the social media conference on what to do. He is still in the village at the minute, longer than he meant to be, rather than being in New Romney. But he'll help anyway.
He'll still help me, whatever.
I think it's one of those things that unless we try it, we don't know how successful it's going to be. We can keep talking about it, or we can just have a go and see what happens. If it doesn't work, we close it. It's not
not the end of the world.
I think I would agree. Yeah.
But it must be at this stage. What he said was closed page. By all means, have an open one later if you get to the point where you're confident enough and you feel you can monitor it and all the rest of it. But that's one of the points. If it's open, you've got to monitor it because you don't know who's saying what that you don't want to know. And that is a whole different business.
Could be closed.
Indeed. Okay, so we've approved a closed Facebook page. Good. Thank you very much. That is helpful. And that gets you out of the job, David.
Yeah.
We'll message you later.
I mean, for me, I just see that as one strand of communication.
Yeah. Oh, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. We've still got Outlook, which is important. Yeah. It's important for certain people. It's also something you can keep in the cupboard later. And we've got the Bush Telegraph, and we've got the other groups that pass messages around, like the Walkers and the Horticultural and all the rest of it. I mean, today there was a message that went out to the horticultural list about the blockage on Small Hythe Road.
Yeah.
Okay, next one is to agree additional cheque signatory names for the bank mandate. We've only got 2 at the minute, so that's a little bit embarrassing. That's Sue and Paul, and Paul's not here.
Awkward if you ask me. I'm not sure about embarrassing. It's just
and incidentally, I did find that there's a statutory obligation for the council. I know we will, in principle, but there's a statutory obligation for the council to pay everything within 30 days. So if you did run out of signatory, it would be dangerous. You're suggesting...
You propose 2 names?
Yes. And it would be really useful if the chairman's obviously a signatory. Always has been. Yeah. And... Well, I was suggesting Colin, but whether anyone else, it was just somebody that is sort of fairly local and that I can...
Not working.
I can...
You're local to middle of the village or accessible?
Well, he walks for a start. which helps.
More accessible.
Yes.
Well, that was the problem with you, Alan, that it would be an extra trip out to the Badlands.
The level of holidays.
Yeah. Oh, that was mentioned, yes. Can we have a proposer for that? I think we have to do this one formally.
Yeah,
if people are happy with that. Okay, so Sue's proposing and David's seconding. Yeah. Is everyone happy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So I've got some forms.
Just what we need to sign.
Well, it needs to be.
She wants to sign a few blank ones.
It needs to be completed. So if you want to take it away and let me have it back, is probably the best way. But one of them if we can check at the end, actually, if you wouldn't mind, because Sue obviously it needs to be signed by 2 signatories at the moment as well. So I need Sue obviously to sign. So in other words, don't rush off at the end, please.
Okay, right, that's at the end. The next thing then is to confirm the date and format for the annual parish meeting. Now, I think you all heard that the date moved a week in order to mean that we didn't have Mike Hill double booked with Wolvenden. And then we had the suggestion today from Yvonne that you were talking about voluntary things, and she suggested inviting people who've been doing voluntary things.
Sorry, can I just for the sake of the minutes, so that if the date's moved, can you say what the date now is that we can put in the minutes?
20th, yes. Oh, yes, sorry, it will be, because it's the 20th of April.
20th?
Of
April. It's the week before it was. It was the 27th. It was the 27th, now it's the 20th. And the hall is booked, and David can't make it.
I can make it, but I probably won't be there at the start.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
7:30.
7:30 is usual. You were away the following week. That's because you said you couldn't make the 27th, so I thought, at least Alan will be able to make it.
I think I'm on the way on the 20th and the 27th. I'm so sorry. But I'm not. I'm just. What day of the week is that?
It's a Thursday.
Anyway, you'll either be here or not.
Indeed. Anyway, that's when we need to do it.
Right.
Yeah, so how do you fit the volunteering thing?
Yes, no,
is that,
I mean, that
lovely, thank you. And I thought of, obviously tree warden and the Lexi and those that, there's things that do things for the parish council especially. Well, no, I wasn't thinking of that, because this is specifically council. Because if you go too far, you end up missing out somebody.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas these are people that,
yes,
we've asked, like the triangle. It's our triangle that they're weeding.
Okay.
So, can it start, are we having a talk on volunteering, or just recognising those people's achievement, or what will it look like?
Yes, I think if I will invite everybody. I will invite them.
Yeah.
And saying, important. Thank you. Please come and we'll have wine and nibbles and meet parish councillors and each other. And
you're right. We've got to think about how we bring this whole volunteering thing to life.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking naturally, but the village's greatest volunteer and who did everything was Peter Dolhoff, and he's died. That's a little ironic we're doing it just now, just as he's gone. Sure. You see what I mean? Yeah. And I'm trying to think how we can bring, with dignity, his contribution to volunteering into this, and there may not be a way.
He was very good at volunteering a lot of people. That was his biggest.
Well, he couldn't do it himself.
Yes.
He knew a man who
you could, yes.
That's all true. Yes, I can vouch for that. Colin can vouch for that. And you can vouch for that.
I was just wondering if someone was going to give an introduction on what volunteering happened in the village, or what volunteering didn't happen that would be useful if it did happen, those sort of things, to try and encourage other people to volunteer, rather than just say we've got these people volunteering.
Well, I have to do my report anyway. Once so that can be added in a bit. It won't be a specialist person.
Sorry?
You want people for the village hall?
Village Hall Committee, for example. Yeah.
Well, do you want to give a little?
I'm quite happy to give an introduction on volunteering.
Good point. Good point. Perfect.
Thank you.
An introduction and also a celebration of those that do.
The success of what's achieved by those people.
Because what we want to try to do is to gather momentum, so we have more people thinking they want to.
Yeah, but of course they won't be there, will they?
But they can go and tell people to come. Or encourage people.
What was really good at Lissipit was the number of children that were involved.
Yes,
it was. They really quite enjoyed themselves.
It was. And they were really smart with the yellow tops on.
Yeah.
Because they went down to their ankles.
Yeah. On 5-year-olds who want to take his off.
Yeah, no, I've got a photo of my 4-year-old granddaughter. She was doing it. She's got, as you say. a long thing. Not here, but in Bristol. But she
So
was.
if you could
Yeah.
let me have a list of those people you're going to invite.
Yes.
to use all.
Right. Good.
And you'll let me have that.
Okay. Next one then is authorising payments. We've got, and I did say earlier we were doing this in the public session, of course. This is for the cemetery. We have got a timesheet and an invoice from Willie Everett as the land agent to the donors of the land for the cemetery. We've talked about this before the two new councillors came on, probably about a year ago. I think the long and the short of this is that it is absolutely normal if you get a donation of land that you pay the other side's costs. They have this land agent. That is one of the things that we just have to grin and bear it. We would obviously rather not pay it, but the fact is that we have to. We always knew we were going to have to. At one level, it looks like quite a lot for what we think, let's say we got, but of course he wasn't our servant, he was theirs, and it's what they got, I suppose. The fact is, however, that on any transaction with a professional involved, you're not going to get much less than this. You know, it's not quite, you wouldn't get out of bed for less, but the fact is that people charge these kind of amounts, and that's what it adds up to in the sort of normal commercial world that David knows. You know, you'd be very pleased to get a bill less than 10 times this.
Can I just ask what the time frame is for the timesheet? It was for ever since it started?
It's the whole lot. We've never paid a penny.
No, okay. So it's
and this polishes it off.
Yes.
Essentially,
15th of June 2013.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He's finished his job.
Yes,
he's not
and
been
that
able to live on it.
Yes, one thing I will try and clarify, as far as the Mallets are concerned, he is not needed anymore.
Okay.
In relation to this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is our final. This is our one and final bill.
Okay. Right.
Well, but whether he is aware, although I'm told that he has been told, but just so that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're thinking is that he may think that he's got more work to do, and therefore there may be another bill.
Mm.
But if he's been told this is it,
yes, and I've been told that he's been told.
Shouldn't be no bills then.
Well, yeah, and should it not go, if we're going to pay him this money, that could go in the correspondence, couldn't it? So thank you for your support.
Yes. Here's the cheque, and we have been informed that there will not be any further charges.
Precisely. Yeah. Straightforward.
Yeah.
That's a
Very
different
normal. Right. Okay. Can I have it's a significant amount. Can I have someone to propose and second that?
Yeah.
George is proposing and Colin is seconding. Okay, and everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Especially
good. Good. As I say, I mean, it would be nice if we didn't have that sort of a bill, but the fact is that we have to just be realistic about it. It's dealt with. Now, the next one is the exorbitant clerk's expenses. Mainly stamped envelopes. What?
The clerk's exorbitant expenses, not the exorbitant clerk.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I'm
Yes.
worried about the ink cartridges.
Yeah. That's to save you having to print stuff. In fact, think of the amount I've been doing for you on my new laser printer. Right, are we all right with this amount? The Christmas refreshments, of course, that's because Yvonne goes and buys them, but posts it against the chairman's allowance, what I never see. I only drink. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all right?
Good. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Everyone's happy with that. We now come to correspondence.
Right, the air ambulance, a request, it's all the usual, continuing improving our services to provide the best care possible, and as a result in 2013 we introduced blood on board for people suffering from severe blood loss and began operating one of our helicopters 24 hours a day. We have recently taken possession of a new helicopter, which will soon be operational. This aircraft can fly faster, further and for longer, enabling us to reach, treat and deliver our patients to hospital even faster and potentially reach more people in time. Our life-saving service costs £6.5 million a year, and we depend almost entirely on the support and generosity of the public to raise this sum. We are seeking a grant of £250 from Wittersham Parish Council towards the ongoing costs of providing our life-saving service in your parish. Thank you very much for considering, etc. We last gave them £250 in December 2014. We have, out of our 600 budgeted, spent 250 at the moment.
And that's up until
The end of this month.
yeah.
We've got money
Yes.
to spend.
So we've got 350 remaining. And we won't have anything else.
Well, no, because this is the last meeting.
I mean, I would say that if we've got £350 remaining, why wouldn't we?
Because they'll ask for 350 next time.
What happens if we don't spend that then? Do we lose it, or is it just
No,
carry
it's
forward?
just, yeah,
So
it's
it
just
doesn't
there. It doesn't
so
carry
it just
forward,
carry
it's just in there. Yes, it doesn't carry.
No, it just sits in our bank. George.
Yes, it doesn't get carried forward to the next year's donation
Right, okay.
budget. But
It's as good as anything to spend a little bit of money on, isn't it?
So are people saying they want to just give the 250 again or the 350?
I think
250.
200.
That's what they asked for, and we meet it. Okay, we can do that.
More than they asked for.
And then hopefully we last another couple of years before we do it again. Because we've done that with some others where we only do it every 2 years. Haven't we?
well, victim support we do every year, but it's £50. We used to do 100, and now we've split it so that they get £50. But one thing that some of you may not remember, it was a year or so ago, but it was after I think probably we gave the money. They obviously have a thank you to lots of people, and there is a tea party over in Surrey somewhere, which we got an invite to,
Oh, yes,
and we
and Alf
sent Alf.
Yeah.
Yeah,
By
lovely time.
helicopter.
Yeah, lovely time.
Good.
Right, that's
Okay. Can I just go back? This is, we've agreed the invoice to the land agent, no problem with that, but it was just a little note that I made for myself which I forgot to raise. A question for you, are we paying it direct or via the Mallet solicitor? I think he
It's
probably
direct.
expects it direct.
Yes, and it's from his company, not his. If you remember, if you saw the invoice,
saw
it's a
that.
company.
Encompass the letter. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Do we pay direct? Okay. Invictus sign, village sign plaques. You've seen this?
Yes.
This
Yes, I
came
did.
through to me just unsolicited, and I passed it on. I don't know what people think about that. I don't go back to the time when it was there. Apparently Yvonne told me it disappeared when the sign was changed some years ago by KCC. I have seen Invicta signs, you know, not literally the Invicta, but the horse. I have seen them on some other village signs where obviously the sign hasn't been changed. This is not part of the sign like they used to be. It's a thing to sort of bolt on the top. I don't know if it's it's unfortunately, of course, they're nickable again. It's
How
a bit
much
of
is it?
aluminium casting.
That must be a cost.
Yes.
Yes. Fully painted, £100.
Or aluminium primer, 75.
25. You'd obviously get it fully done. You wouldn't want one. You'd want several, of course.
We talked some time ago, I seem to remember, about the entrances to the village, and we said about, you know, some villages have those
The gates.
So we said something we could do as part of, is that still on the plan?
It's a good thought. It would have to be taken up with highways, and we'd have to pay for them. They won't do anything. They'll do virtually nothing now without being paid for it.
But it enhances the look of a village, and it makes you feel that you're entering into something that is, you know, residential. And I'm just wondering if all that, with SIDS and everything, actually, does that make people think?
It's a good thought, actually. It's a good thought.
It is a good thought.
Can we then move that to asking you if you would talk to highways about whether there are reasons why we wouldn't be able to have that, or whether we could, and if so, typically how much they would cost? You're quite right, actually. It is in Walden and some others have
Yeah.
them.
Well, a small high pebble, presumably as
Yeah.
part of Tenston Town Council.
Yeah.
And it does make you feel as though the village takes a bit of pride in its in between the signs.
I suspect originally KCC probably did them because they all are the same. They probably did them, but for some reason Wittersham didn't get one.
I'd rather spend
I
money
think-
on those than on these.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, it comes then potentially with a sign on it anyway.
When we first think slowing down, it was the Dragon's Teeth. That's what we had instead, because that's what they gave you as the entrance to the village. So we had the
Did you say that?
Dragon's Teeth, rather than, I don't think we were allowed that at the time. This at the time. So I think they said you
There
could.
may be rules
Dragon's
about it.
Teeth
Well, of course,
instead.
Walden would fall into the same, but it could. But they're A road, we're B
Just
road.
finding out.
Whether it's a bus route, whether it's this, whether it's that. Okay, that's a good point, David. So we'll make inquiries there. Kentmen of the Trees.
Yeah, so
competition.
just asked if they wanted contact details, so I've given them our tree warden,
Yep.
Phil Wilcox's
Good.
details, so they should be contacting him.
Working party reports, the caretaker report, the van, you all got picked up on this earlier, that's underway, the check has gone, he should be collecting it tomorrow.
And no, it's probably end of the week or
End of the
beginning
week,
of next. However, can I just thank everybody for coming back so quickly on that? It was really appreciated. It was,
So the
it was
purchase
good.
of the van is underway, and then he's got to have a tow bar fitted and the extra security, because we've had break-in before.
Where's the old one being sold or being sold? Or?
Yes, well, yes. Somebody,
Surprise.
yes,
Some fool.
somebody in Warehorn
Okay.
has asked Alf, and at the moment he's willing to pay £300 for it.
This is not
Considering you can't turn the key to start it.
It's extraordinary if they put a vehicle out and somebody stops and says, I want to buy it. I mean,
It's a show, doesn't it?
bizarre.
So that offsets the cost a bit anyway.
Yes.
That's
Oh
my
yeah,
point.
indeed. Well, it saves us getting rid of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good, thank you. The monthly transaction statement that we've had given out.
Yes,
Very
not much on it. No.
Just a bit. Well, let's do that.
Thank you.
Okay, done.
Thanks.
Planning, considered since the last meeting the Wittersham School renewal of planning permission for the mobile accommodation. We supported it. Granary in Action Lane. There was an E missed out of replacement garage, by the way.
Oh dear. Thank you.
Turn over the page. Didn't say what happened there.
Yes, no, I didn't. That's supported, and the Lordings, because I didn't have it at the time.
So the Granary was supported, and then the Lordings.
And the Lordings supported too.
Supported as well.
Yes.
Did anyone else? I never actually went one way or the other because I was a bit bemused as to exactly what they were asking for. I couldn't work out whether they were replacing the hedge at the front with you, because the red line went along there. It was a very inexplicit
And it was a different
drawing.
colour, slightly different colour
Or
from the
different
other.
red. I will see.
It
Yes.
was
Oh, well, I
follow
didn't
up from the
spot.
previous one.
Maybe I'm dark red and middle red blind.
Yes.
It's between the Lordings and the Lordings Oaks.
Yes,
isn't
it's
it?
just
Yeah. That part
which
I
we
understood.
previously
But that line then
supported.
appeared to go right round the main
Yeah,
road, and
no.
that's where I thought, are we going to lose the hedge along there?
No, I think it was that was
Rather
showing that
relevant to what we
showing
said earlier.
what they owned.
It was the red line for
Perimeter.
ownership mixed up with the
That
red
was their
line for the
boundaries,
hedge.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I would have been happy with that then. But if it's gone through anyway because of the weight of numbers, that's excellent. Good. decisions received, the one in Moon's Green that we worried about last time, and we had Billy Joe Gleeson pointing out some of the facts. They granted it, but am I surprised? No. They're not going to stand on that.
We're going walking that way tomorrow, so we'll have a look.
Indeed.
Are you walking?
Singly. Right, okay. Highways. No Paul to report. Anything from you?
No, I mean, I intend complaining about the way they've repaired the potholes up at the stocks, because they're just falling apart. Yes, I'm going to ask the Darren to come out and check. You know, that's got to be a complaint. It's not good enough. Otherwise, nothing.
Okay. Public rights of way. I don't have anything.
No, I haven't got anything. Should
Open
be dry
spaces, David?
No, nothing to report.
Okay.
All good.
Just one thing. I received a complaint about the condition of the land behind Jubilee Field, where the to the left. So they've got the hoardings sort of in the middle.
Yeah.
This is the left bit. Somebody's been cutting a hedge there and just piled all the branches up. They've sort of had a bit of a bonfire. And there's also an area where they keep leaving rubbish. And there's somebody, I think probably Woodland View, is having a bonfire and then keeps. So, but the complaint was that it's our responsibility to clear it all up. They don't like it, so could we do it? And also when we build our houses, it will look a mess. So I have pointed out it's actually Ashford Borough Council. We are only, our job is to cut the grass and trim the hedges, not to clear away all their rubbish all the time. So I've contacted Ashford and I've told them to as well.
Yeah, so as well as having a dog delivered to the house on Saturday when we were doing the litter pit. I kid you not. I got complaints about a sofa kitchen unit that had been tipped at the back of someone's property.
That's within the hedge. Yes, it's all somebody. Yeah,
So it's
that's the Ewan Land Path, public right of way that goes alongside the OC.
Someone complaining around some people that throw food out for animals.
It's the same area.
Is that the same one? Right, okay.
Yes, so
There's
it's all
also
Ashford Borough
someone's put out
Council.
a load of branches up that way.
Well, that's the bit up behind.
That's the bit you're talking about.
Yes.
Right, okay. Going up to
So
Jubilee
all
Fields.
that sort of comes under open spaces because it's ours. But that's the bit we will start cutting now, because we used to have the whole bit round back of Jubilee Field used to be gang mode, same as the bit behind sort of Forge Meads. But Alf will be cutting that area because it's smaller now.
Right. Okay. The cemetery and churchyard. I think you've seen, haven't you, the stuff come through from the solicitors for the mallets. They've asked us to agree the heads of terms, which are remarkably undetailed or uninformative. The only thing I did spot there, which I think we already knew, is that they want the so-called stock-proof fence as well as a hedge on our side of it. Yeah?
Yep.
Stock-proof fence only has to be wire or something, doesn't it?
Yes.
But we're actually planning to put a metal.
Well, we
nice
will,
metal
but
one.
yes. But I think it.
Okay. So I don't think, unless anyone had any thoughts, there's an anxiety about the heads of terms. The plan is almost as informative as most plans in the land registry are. I mean, it doesn't have a dimension. Indeed, it's the one
we
we've
had
always
in the
had.
first place.
It doesn't tell us anything really, other than it's about this big. I was surprised actually it was only a third of an acre. I think it's half an acre.
Yeah.
But whatever it is. So, and she's asking for the 500 plus that. Is that payment on account, or is that actually what they expect to charge us?
I don't know.
Okay. You might, in sending the cheque, ask her if there is an estimate of any extras. It'll be our solicitor who has to register it afterwards, so that's going to come in their bill.
Although I had a phone call today from Mary Mallet
Yep.
saying that she'd heard that it was our solicitor. We hadn't instructed our solicitor yet. She thought she'd heard. That's where the hold-up was.
That goes back about 2 years, doesn't it?
And it's the same firm, you know. It's not as even if it's two different.
It's worse, 2 different offices. Impossible. And a Chinese wall. Okay, so we're happy with that.
Thank
500. Yep, good.
Can I just mention the churchyard? Have you heard from Roger?
No.
No. Perhaps I should mention it. We had a PCC meeting last Monday, and one of the church wardens said he's noticed a big crack in the wall. It's a different place to the one that's been mended. It's where the car's parked. I actually looked on Sunday. I think he's probably right. I don't know if you've looked.
Yes, I've looked. Yeah, the one. It'll be the tree that's causing it.
Yeah. Right. You'll probably hear from him.
It's not in imminent danger of falling or anything.
It's going towards the tree. It's not coming out. So
It's not going to fall on people.
no, and yet, I mean, Alf I saw it with Alf, and Alf did a good push, and it's not going anywhere.
The problem you've got is the tree's rather a nice one, and it would be terribly sad to do anything which brought forward the need to cut the trees down. So
you see, one of the things that Alf says is whether you put
put a bridge over it.
the other side.
Support.
Yes.
Yeah.
To hold it.
Yeah.
You know, that's.
Build up like a pier of brick the other side just to.
Anyway, we need once I get it,
then a ragstone wall or something like that.
Yeah, it's a wall that goes along the front.
I'm just
Will
trying
you
to
walk
think
in tomorrow?
No, I know.
Have a
I'm
look.
just trying to think what it looks like. I mean, presumably, if the tree is actually coming up and, you know, as the sort of root gets bigger and pushes it, the answer, if the worst comes to the worst, although more expensive, is to take that piece of wall out, bridge across the tree, and then put the wall back. Give the tree room, in other words, because otherwise, every time you fix it, the tree goes up another half an inch and it goes again.
Sounds like we need a proper survey first to see what exactly is.
It needs a proper person. Yeah, but I'll have a look with you. Yeah. Failing a proper person, I'll come and have a look.
I did begin to do some research, not yet completed, on grants for church walls, and I'm on the case.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but definitely now.
Our grants man.
I used to be awfully good at it, but it's a skill I've lost, so I can got to re-educate myself.
Next one is Village Hall Management Committee. George.
Yes, as your representative on that committee.
And indeed the committee.
one of the 5 existing people on the committee, which there should obviously be a lot more people than that. If I start off with the good news is the quiz on Friday raised nearly £800, so that's good news, and that's already being well spent because we're having a new boiler put in May. So the problems we've had before with the boiler not working, and also being an old boiler, they reckon if it's more than about 10 years old it's inefficient. Well, this one probably is at least double that, if not more.
Sure.
And it's continuously needing to be maintained. We're spending a lot of money on oil, but also a lot of money on maintenance as well.
So that would be good.
And it's going to be a double system, so you'd be able to separate the 2 off, so you could have this room heated and not the other side, and vice versa.
Get a grant for that.
I don't know about that, but we've got the money anyway. So, but if we can get a grant, yes. But
I get a phone call at least once a day wanting to give me a grant for a gas boiler because we don't have gas in it.
In terms of issues, that was the good news. The issues are, as I say, we're short of people on the committee, and not so much in terms of people sitting around the table making decisions. We can cope with that. It's having people there, feet on the ground, when you're organising events. And going back to what you were saying before about the village forum coming here and us being able to provide lunch for how many hundred people, I don't know. Therefore, I think that's something we need to work on, and I think with what we've done at the moment, Rita's done a letter to go out, which is going to circulate around to various organisations, because all the user groups, non-commercial user groups, should have a representative on that committee, and so we're trying to do that. Linked with that, we've also discovered when we went on a training day that more and more village hall committees are going over to be incorporated rather than, because at the moment we've basically got unlimited liability in terms of something going wrong. So we're looking at that. It's probably going to cost £1,500, but that will be money well spent in terms of making sure it's safe for everybody. And it also means we'd have the opportunity to clarify lots of other issues at the same time that at the moment people are a bit unsure about. Let's put it that way.
Did you look up, or did you find out on your course all about CIO?
No,
I looked it up on the internet, and there's a lot of information there.
I know you said that to me, then I couldn't remember it. So see, I've written it down now. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Charitable incorporated organisation or something like that. I didn't know whether it was an organisation that kind of gave you cover or what. It's actually the name of a thing you can do.
Yeah. Okay.
So you could be a CIO instead of being an unincorporated charity.
So thank you.
And as you said, about 1,500.
Yeah.
When you did the course, it was an ACRK course, I suppose.
Yes.
And therefore it was whatever the woman's name was.
Kathy
something.
Budgeon.
Not Budgeon.
No, Jenny Bradbury.
Bradbury, yeah.
Jenny Bradbury, that's it. Yeah, she was the one who talked to us. Yeah. Okay. And if things, I mean, it'll probably involve the parish council to the extent that we're one of the trustees, but beyond that, we're the custodian trustee, but beyond that, it's something that the village hall can pursue itself. Yeah, good. I think that would make eminent good sense, especially because you're trying to get people onto it. And it's really, it's not very fair on you or on anybody else. Just die quietly, please. Okay, that's very helpful, George. Thank you. Next planning meeting we don't have organised, hopefully. Next full council meeting, usual date. Items for information. Thanks, George. Items for information. The first one, I sent a note out to you all, which was the Cout CAFAS information event, the one which Paul Carter spoke to. I don't know if you've managed to go through that. I did put a summary on the top, which I thought might be helpful. Frankly, I don't think anyone knows what's happening, but what they're all definite about is something's going to happen because it's broken. They might be exaggerating, but watch this space. I suspect that for all the talk, there's probably relatively little that's going to trickle down to us. Who knows? The one big possibility would be if Kent's Carter's view carried the day, and Kent got broken up into a lot of smaller area boards. Because my guess would be then that Tenterden would be one, and we would then be a satellite of some sort of Tenterden. And there's no detail of how that might happen or might work, other than the fact that I assume just because they're 5 miles away instead of 15 miles away, that we would be less autonomous than Ashford. They would say, well, we can do this, we can do that, we can do something else, rather than, well, obviously Wittersham's out in sticks, let's leave them to it. But that's all uncertain. The next one was the rural conference, which I knocked out a note over the weekend. That was a bit sort of good in parts, curate's egg. And that's what I more or less said in the note. I just got asked for feedback today. Some bits were very interesting, but I mean it was fragments. It wasn't kind of on a particular issue. There were things that they fit where they touch, as far as Wittersham's concerned. The most impressive probably was the ex-High Sheriff talking about the police and crime. Very positive about them, and you would have to be as the ex-High Sheriff. But his main message was that the Kent Police's intelligence is really very good. I think he means intelligence in one particular sense. Very keen on Country Eye, which I found I do have on my phone. I've never used it. But if anyone reports anything on Country Eye, such as fly tipping or criminal damage or antisocial behaviour or something, you need to do it on 101 as well, because otherwise it doesn't go into the statistics. They will come up. They know 101 isn't very good. 20 minutes apparently is seemingly a typical wait, but they are going to have one day, someday, if ever, a website version of 101 where you can report without having to wait. Okay, anyway, so just it's in the notes.
I see you had a report from David Rees from Y.
Yes. He told us about their village hall rebuilding and fundraising and that. They have a neighbourhood plan, and they're of course a quite decent sized community. It's a much different place to here. One of the interesting things he said, if we ever get into fundraising and looking at matched funding, even for the stuff you do, Alan, he said, whenever you have meetings, make sure you add up and value all the hours and put them in for matched funding. Yes. He said, when they say, what have you put in, say, well, we've had people spending X hours times £10 an hour times what we've put in £2,000 worth of work. I mean, it sounded a bit rich, but if you can get away with it, then it's worth a shot. They've been doing it.
With the David Rees camp.
I'm sure they've been doing it. Okay, so that's Royal Conference, and yes, he was the last one. Volunteer warden scheme is not down here under items for information. I did go to it's my fault when we did the agenda, I did go to the launch last week, which Mike Hill was overseeing. It was at St Michael's Village Hall, organised by Joe, our warden. We heard from 2 volunteer wardens, both very interesting. One, a young lady who started as the village warden, you would probably know, Colin, in Great Chart, a youngish lady, married girl. And she has, since she was so excited by it, she's now become a full-time employed warden for Lydd. And the other one was the volunteer warden for Tenterden, who is an ex-military soldier, I guess. He's a full-time employee and he loves it. He does it evenings and weekends. Now that brings us to a key point, which is that if we are to get in it, which I would like to, we have to have someone to do it. And I don't know if anyone has any ideas. We've got till the end of the month to try and persuade them. My feeling has been, lately I've said this much to Yvonne, I think we're probably more likely to get a female, just because of the way life works. There are more of the men that work, not counting oldies like me who don't work. And of course women largely work now, but if anything there are more of them that don't. Flexible. And capable of doing 2 things at once. Or multitasking, as people call it. But if anyone has got any ideas, please tell me.
No.
I have got one thought. I think it's a long shot, but I have got one thought. Another one I think is probably ruled out. Okay. Anything else before we...
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, PCSO's report.
Oh, yes.
Could you please pass on that I have continued to monitor the speed throughout the village and will continue to do so this month and feedback at the next meeting. There was a report of antisocial behaviour regarding youths emptying rubbish from a skip and throwing the items around. They were stopped and spoken to. Anything which needs to be brought to my attention, please email or pass on my email address on. If not, I'll be attending the farmers market on the 28th of March. Well, I'll be there then because that's when I'm meeting Michelle.
Good.
And also, this came in today, I think it was, road closure, Appledore Level Crossing, weekend of 24th to the 27th of March. So, just so that, you know, if it's just personal information,
really. They seem to be doing all
really.
their level crossings because they did the one at Oldham, didn't they, the other week?
Yeah. Yes. So, of course, the diversion is a long way round. but I'm sure it will be well marked. But that's just
Okay.
for information, personal information.
Does anyone
really.
else have anything else to add? George?
Thank you.
Alan?
Something, I have a friend who's something to do with the Kent Red Cross, and honestly I agreed that we would let the Red Cross come to our garden in April, the 23rd of April. And the WI are helping and the British Legion are helping, but it's just to say that it's the Red Cross, it's a big Red Cross fundraising day, when they hope an awful lot of people will come, and it's how the Red Cross raises some of its money, and they're having some stalls, and I think there's a chap from the Antiques Roadshow coming who does ceramics and one or two other things. But anyway, the 23rd of April, and it's
St George's Day.
2 until 6 in our garden.
They have written quite a bit for the magazine as well. I've seen it.
It's in the magazine, and there are little leaflets going around as well. Don't you? I thought I just.
So it's the Potman's Heath fate.
It's not no, it's the Red Cross fundraising day, and there it is.
Good.
And it just happens to be in Wittersham this year.
Oh, I see. It's yeah, okay.
Kent wide.
And you're here, are
Oh,
you?
really?
No, I'm considering my options. I think.
Sue?
No, I've got nothing.
No.
Colin? David?
No, thank you.
Okay. I haven't got anything else. So
I just
now.
wanted to ask David and George, because Yvonne kindly or others let me have the correspondence that comes round. And I've twice been in the situation where I know where Colin and I know where Sue lives, and I thought, well, I need to give this to David, and I'm not quite sure. I was terrified I'd put it through the wrong letterbox or something. Which are your two houses? Do you mind me asking?
So I'm Briney House, which is literally opposite Judy.
Yeah, and
mine's next to the Gothic house, next one down from the Gothic house, the white
we're
house.
both very close. So I didn't want to give the stuff to the wrong person.
Okay. So all we need to do now is, can I have someone propose and second a resolution for a closed session for the cemetery extension? Just the one thing that we've still got to discuss, apart from the things we've already done in the public meeting. So that's Sue and David, is it? Sue, David. Everyone happy with that? Right, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for staying till the end, apart from the closed session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.